frequency station.
Hi, welcome to the GARF Network. I'm Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of The Howling. It's actually the day of its New York premiere, 40 years later. And we're going to be having director Joe Dante and lead actress Dee Wallace on later. But first, we have a couple of announcements. Actually, I want to talk about our website, which is in the banner right now. We've actually just had an overhaul, so everybody please come by and check it out. There's going to be a ton of updates coming up as well, so stay tuned to that URL right there.
Yeah, it's a great looking site. We have a lot more planned. We're just building it. I think you guys are going to love it. We're going to add some content for just the network that we think you guys are really going to love, so please head over there. And while you're there, please make sure you sign up for the newsletter that comes out quarterly. The next newsletter should be coming out April 1st. So please get in on that with all the news and notes from the George Romero Foundation. In addition to the website, we also have our Patreon, patreon.com/thegarfofficial. As a Patreon, you get access to some behind the scenes videos, some Patreon only exclusives. We have a new interview coming up for our patrons here in the coming weeks. Any donation helps from $1 on up. We are a nonprofit and it helps us keep the lights on, helps keep you bringing you guys great new programming and any special features. Once we get back into the world, hopefully there's going to be a lot more that we can offer with that. But right now we're building it up to get you guys some really good exclusives just for the Patreon members. So please think about donating even $1. We'd really appreciate it.
That's right. Every little bit helps. So please check out that URL when you get a chance and consider becoming a subscriber. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guests. We have director Joe Dante and actress Dee Wallace. How are you guys doing tonight?
Hey guys.
Hi.
Great.
I appreciate you guys coming on, and it's hard to believe. Been 40 years since to the day.
It sure is hard to believe.
Yeah, we haven't aged at all, Joe.
No, we look just the same.
Yeah.
You guys look great. And actually, we have several questions that we're going to go through with you guys, but also we've had a lot of folks chime in via Facebook with their own questions that we're going to kind of get to at the end. So, but just to get started about talking about The Howling, I had a question for you, Joe. Coming in to The Howling, or just prior to The Howling, you were working on a third Jaws sequel with Universal. What happened with that? Did that kind of fall apart?
Well, I was doing a picture called Jaws 3 People 0 for Universal and the National Lampoon. It was would have been my first studio picture. And the producers were Zanuck and Brown from the Jaws side and Matty Simmons from the National Lampoon side. But the problem was that they could never agree on what kind of movie they wanted to make. The National Lampoon people wanted to make an R-rated comedy. Zanuck and Brown were very worried about shitting on their concept, their Jaws movies, which were going to become so important in their careers. And I already had a little checkered past because I had done Piranha, which was a Jaws ripoff that the Universal was not too pleased with. But nonetheless, I was in my aquatic period, so I got this other job. And while I was on it, it looked like it was getting a little shaky because these people really just didn't know what they wanted to do. And in the meantime, my friend Mike Fennell, who had worked with me before, was on a picture called The Howling, which was being done at Alco Embassy, and they were in the process of replacing their director and apparently their script as well. And so Mike called me up and said, would you like to do a werewolf picture? And I always liked werewolf pictures, and I thought, yeah, I'd love to do a werewolf picture. I just don't know I can't walk out on this studio movie that I've been asked to do. But as serendipitous as it was, my picture fell apart just around the time that they needed to replace this other director, and who has a credit on the movie as a producer. Steve Lane was his name. So I moved over to The Howling, and I read the script. this was based on a book by Gary Brandner, which is one of those supermarket paperbacks where you read it on the Trailways bus and you don't think too much about what's going on. It's full of incidents, but it doesn't really, if you add it all up, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the script that had been written was kind of based a lot on the book, and it just didn't work. So John Sayles had been called in to rewrite Verona, and so first I went to another friend of mine, and we worked on it, trying to find a way to adapt the book in a way that it didn't seem ridiculous that there was, you know, a dilapidated town that had nobody lived in it, but it was on a main highway, and it was full of werewolves. Anyway, that didn't work out, and so I asked John to come in, and he rewrote it and came up with a whole different slant on it, which was much hipper and I think more clever, much more contemporary. And we got to make it. We didn't have a lot of money because AFCO was a pretty cheap company, and they were, at the moment, they were, you know, they had made The Graduate, and they had made movies that were, you know, very popular, but they were currently in a horror movie groove, and they had done Scanners. They were about to start on Escape from New York, and they were carving a little niche for themselves of exploitation drive-in kind of movies. And this seemed to fit in with what they wanted to do, but they didn't really have a lot of money to spend.
And kind of piggybacking on that, Dee, I mean, prior to coming aboard of the Howling, you had been in a variety of genres of film. Did you have any concerns being typecast as a scream queen, having already done The Hills Have Eyes, and then you were coming aboard to do the Howling?
Well, no, in between that was 10. It certainly wasn't a horror film. And the first film I did was a religious film. So I was kind of all over the place. But, you know, I read the script for The Howling and went, I mean, back then it was, oh my God, I get to do a lead in a movie. I wasn't at the place in my career where I thought, maybe I shouldn't do this genre yet. You know, it was like, it's a job and it's a lead, and it was I thought, a great script, and it fascinated me. The whole context of the animal within us, and how that reflected in the werewolf colony, the struggle between good and bad, which is, if you look over my career, it's been kind of a theme of a lot of the movies that I've done. And I went in and auditioned for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I had seen you in 10, and that was what sold me on the idea that you would be good for this picture.
Now,
and
I see in 10, which was a comedy, that I would be good for the Howling.
Because you were really good in it. Period. You know.
Thank you.
You were really good in it, and the character. I wouldn't say it played to your strengths, but you know, she starts out as a sort of a hard-bitten newswoman, and then she has this nervous breakdown because she's attacked by, we don't know what, because of the editing. We don't know exactly what it was that attacked her, but she's very upset, and she needs to go away, and so they send her up to this place called the Colony, which is run by a self-help guru who's written a book and is apparently a media celebrity. And supposedly the idea is that she's going to, you know, find her way there. But apparently the real thought is that she's going to be inducted into this group of people who are, in fact, secretly werewolves and are being groomed by this guy. Huh? What?
I said it was an early take on QAnon.
Well, without the politics, yeah, it was actually.
Yeah, really. So,
it was really Est. It was a take on Est, because that was the current self-help thing. You went to these meetings, and they didn't let you go to the bathroom, and it was a very strange, in Semi-Tough. There's a whole subplot.
I was going to say, wasn't there a Burt Reynolds film that's Semi-Tough, right?
Yeah, that's a subplot in that, and that was the current thinking at the time, and so John just sort of riffed on that.
Well, what I loved, what drew me to the script, was I got to play a lot of colors. You know, I got to play a big arc. and that's what excites me. I get to do a lot of good emotional work. And when I went in to audition, I don't know, it's hard not to fall in love with Joe. I mean that sincerely. He's just so real and so available. And I loved our producer, Dan Blatt, God rest his soul. He was like, Dan just took care of me. You know, I was young and I was trying to do this very serious technique that I had learned from Charles Conrad, which really changed my whole life in acting. You know, but Joe will be the first one to tell you that Dee needed a lot of, how would you say it, Joe?
Hand holding, I think, is the phrase.
Hand holding. That's a nice thing. I think, you know, a lot of people don't know this story because I was engaged to Christopher at the time. And Dan called me one day and said, you know, we've got a great cast, Dee, but we can't find your husband. And I said, well, exactly what are you looking at? And literally he said, we need somebody who's really strong and virile, but he's got a nice emotional softness to a side of him. And I went, holy hell, I'm engaged to him. But at that moment, I can't say that. They'll never hire him. So I said to Dan, you know, there's this guy I did chips with, Christopher Stone or Smith or some S word. I said. So they went out. You guys went out and found him and brought him to audition.
And he got the part without us ever knowing.
Without us ever knowing, right?
That there was any connection until one day Dan Blatt called.
Yes, and he calls me, and I pick up the phone, and he said, "Oh, Dee," and I said, "Yeah, hi, Dee." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you. You know that guy that you recommended? Well, we found him and we loved him and we hired him." And I said, "No, you called the right number." Because, oh shit. You know, look at it this way, Dan. You'll only have to get one trailer.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
So
but Dan, you know, Dan was an established producer and of somewhat higher brow movies than this one, and he was under the he was a little sheltered in his high end bubble, and what excited him about The Howling was the idea that he said, "Boy, isn't this cool? The idea that a human being turns into an animal, turns into a wolf. I mean, that's never been done before." So we had to sort of explain to him that this was just the latest.
Childlike, though, Dan.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
He had this wonderful side of him that was just beautifully childlike, and I just loved him. He held my hand. So.
And more importantly, he let us make the picture we wanted to make. And he stood up. He stood up for us against the studio when they wanted to do an ad campaign. Now, get this: a naked woman, one half of her is human, and the other half of her is all furry and like a wolf. And so this is their view of how they were going to sell this movie. And Dan Blatt hit the ceiling like I had never seen anybody in a meeting. This is garbage. This is not our movie. You can't sell this picture this way. We didn't work hard like this to make people think we made a piece of shit. And he really scared them. And he scared them, in fact, into coming up with a pretty good campaign that really did sell the movie without giving away the werewolf angle. Because the whole problem, the burden that this picture had was that at that time, werewolf movies were, unbeknownst to Dan, but they were still very, very well known in the public eye, and they were considered a little corny because they were. Well, the last couple of werewolf pictures hadn't done very well, and so we didn't want to go there. We didn't want to. And what was selling at the moment for AFCO Embassy was slasher movies like Prom Night, And so we said, well, let's make people think it's one of those kind of movies so that when they get in there, the supernatural angle will surprise them, and that it won't be something that they're onto before they get in there. And so we sold it without, you didn't know, you couldn't tell that it was a werewolf movie. You could tell there was something weird about it because there was a woman screaming and a hand ripping a cloth, and there was a face behind it, and but you couldn't see exactly what it was going to be about. And it worked out. It was a very good campaign, and the picture turned out to be very successful.
Was there, a conscious effort to update the werewolf mythos and kind of remove, like the Dick Miller scene kind of removed a couple of the elements of the classic films? Was that?
Well, I think you had to acknowledge that stuff. I mean, the difference between The Howling and all the previous pictures was it was the first movie in which the characters knew as much as the author, as the audience, and they didn't have to run off to the library and look up books and ask the old professor what lycanthropy means. Because the people in the movie watch the Wolfman on TV because it's part of the pop culture, and it's the first one of those movies that I think was self-reflexive enough to say, look, we all know what we're doing here. This is the world we all live in. It's not a sacrosanct world where people don't know about werewolves. Of course, it's part of their lives. They just don't believe in them. And so in that sense, I think it was the forerunner of the Scream movies and a lot of the movies that came afterward that were about the tropes and the cliches of the genre.
Yeah, and I want to add, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this, Joe, that finding those old clips and even paying for them were all your idea. And
they weren't in the script, that's for sure.
What?
They weren't in the script and they weren't in the budget, but we found a way to use
it. Uplifted the picture so much. And that's kudos to you, that you really brought that imagination into it. It made a huge difference to me for the movie.
Well, I thought it would probably be the only werewolf movie I ever got to make, so I wanted to make it as good as possible.
And you brought in so many of the old characters' names, and the fans just love that stuff. They're schooled in that stuff, and it was. It took a lot of time and research, and I just always admired you for coming forward to do that for all of us.
To kind of follow up with that, Joe, you had said that, in the universe of The Howling, werewolves exist. Everyone knows what it is. Did that influence your decision to put stuff like the wolf in chili and those kind of, I don't want to call them winks to the audience in the film?
Look, when you make these movies, you have to not only make them, but you have to watch them over and over and over. You have to cut them and you have to mix them. And if you don't put some things in for yourself, just some little Mad Magazine image gags that people maybe the first time around they don't notice it, but then the second time they do, it just keeps. I've done that through my whole career. It just keeps things interesting for me.
Well, and just has a wonderfully weird sense of humor.
Well, weird anyway.
Every day.
Talk about finding Robert Picardo and how crucial his performance was to the success and the effectiveness of this film.
Well, Bob was the first person that we saw for that role. I had seen him on stage in a play with Jack Lemmon. But the real appeal for Bob, who totally freaked Dee out at his when he did his read through, he basically did the scene in the booth where he's creeping her out, and he really creeped her out. I mean, he was we were all creeped out. I mean, he was just a really good actor, but he also had this amazing talent to be able to sit still under Rob Bottin's makeup for hours and hours and hours on end. I mean, Rob was a perfectionist and he really wanted it to be great. And there was one day where he was making up Bob for his transformation scene. And we kept saying, so is it ready yet? He said, no, not quite. And so we're sitting in this rented stage and we're not shooting anything. We're waiting for him to come down. Didn't shoot anything that day because it was never ready. It was never good enough. And so finally, at the end of the day, we just had to say, well, we're all going to go home. You'll have to stay in the makeup all night, Bob, and then we'll shoot it in the morning. That's what I got to go with.
I didn't know that. Wow.
How about you, Dee? How about working with Bob?
Oh, I love Robert. He's a great actor, but he did totally creep me out. Of course, those were the days that Dee went into La La Land pretty easily, and it was sometimes. I think by the end of the picture, Joe and Dan, probably pretty much everybody, was really happy that Chris had ended up in the cast because, Chris
Dee had a tendency to live the scenes, and so sometimes she would work herself up into if the scene called for being hysterical, she would work her up to a fit of hystericalness, and then we don't schedule the morning breakfast scene for after that scene. You have to, you just want to go with what's there. And I remember one night after we had done a particularly grueling day of her being upset all day, Chris came in and he said, "Okay, where's the basket?" So we said, "She's over there."
Chris, first of all, Chris worked in the absolute opposite way that I did. I mean, he broke stuff down and he made his beats and all that. I don't work that way. I just get my energy up and let the character come through me. So the scene, for example, in the cabin where he has to hit me, right? And Joe says, "Well, you guys live together. I'm sure you worked this out last night. Let me see what you have." And Chris said, "I'm sorry. My leading actress doesn't rehearse." and he said, "Look, I know how to take a stage hit, and I know he's not really going to hit me." And we got it, didn't we? We got it on the first or second take.
We did. Yeah, it's a good scene.
But I remember your face. It was like, say what? But it worked for us. It worked for us when we worked together a lot, and I just needed to always be in the moment, and Chris always needed to know what he was doing, and somehow the two worlds came together.
Dee, before I ask my next question, we do have someone here in the audience that wants to say hello.
Oh, my boogie's on. My beautiful daughter is always also an actress. And since she's
Imagine that.
Give a shout out to her best-selling book, Eat, Pray, #FML, which is helping a lot of people retrieve their power and get their lives back after being hurt by somebody. So, hi, Dad. Thank you.
That's awesome.
I was wondering if she was going to watch. Yeah.
Yep. Just wanted you to let you know that she was watching.
Thanks.
And to follow up with your last comment about, prepping with Chris for the slap, how did you prepare for this role? Did you kind of self-isolate from some of the cast being the werewolves, or how did you want to approach that?
No, I know it sounds airy-fairy before I say it, but for the want of a better word, I just channel the character. I don't know, Joe. Do you have a better way to describe it?
No, I would say you were in the moment. And if the moment happened to include, for instance, there's a scene where she has to go to meet this guy in a porno booth in a theater, in a porno place. Well, we didn't exactly build our porno shop. We went down to Western Avenue and used a real one. And of course, we couldn't redo all the merchandise because we didn't have the money. So basically, we just left everything there and made sure there wasn't anything on screen that was going to get us in trouble. But Dee had to walk through this place with all these images shooting at her from everywhere, and her discomfort in the movie is palpable, and it's absolutely real. That's exactly how she felt. She always thought this was the scuzziest place she'd ever been. She couldn't wait for it to be over. But it totally works for the character.
Watch the porno film too.
Well, that wasn't a real porno film. I shot that in my garage.
Well, from a girl from Kansas, it was a pretty good replication of a porno film. Ew. Ew. The whole place was just dirty and creepy, and Robert was so creepy, and I don't know, it just, for me, the only way I can act is just to be there in the moment and be real in it. I don't know any other way of doing it.
But doesn't that put you in? I mean, for instance, when you had to go on after this picture and make Cujo, which is you trapped in a car with a kid and a supposedly mad dog. I mean, that's a pretty intense situation to go into every day.
Cujo just about killed me. Yeah, it did. You know, they treated me for exhaustion for 2 or 3 weeks after I finished that.
Well, you can tell when you watch it.
But, well, thank you. So, but the Howling was pretty close. You know, fortunately, in both movies, I was working with Chris, and so Chris was always kind of my balance at the end of the day, you know. But I remember one time on the Howling where Mike Fennell, and I can't remember exactly what the situation was, but Mike went to Chris and said, "Can you help us with Dee? Do you remember what situation it was?"
I really don't. I don't, because I don't remember you being unmanageable in any sense.
I know what it was. It's when whomever it was put the blank in the gun.
Oh no, that was somebody.
Oh my God.
He has a thing about guns, and for no apparent reason, or for I don't know how it happened, but somebody just shot off a gun in the soundstage.
No, somebody put a blank in. I was rehearsing with the gun in the car before we did the shot, and there was a blank in it and went off, and you guys lost me for like 2.5, 3 hours. Because I was already like in the moment. You don't remember it that way, huh?
I don't, but that doesn't mean it isn't the way it happened.
Anyway, Mike went to get Chris and said, you know, and I think Chris really ended up kind of slapping me just to get back here. Stop
that's what you do with hysterical women in the movies. You slap them.
Not when they're your wife.
Then you take it home.
Oh my God. Anyway,
those were the days.
Yeah, those were the days.
Can either of you explain the smiley face sticker phenomenon?
Well, you're probably too young to remember.
This
was a big deal at the time. The smiley face fad they were everywhere. It was just all over, and it was horrible. It was just a horrible facet of life. And we figured, well, what better way to upend this thing than to use it as a symbol for a mad killer, which is what it really is anyway. It's still around. I mean, now it's become emojis.
Oh, it's a part of my signature. I don't ever do my signature after the Howling without a smiley face.
So back in the day when you went viral, it used to have to be literally stuck on a wall somewhere.
Yeah, they used to sell them with little stickers. You could put them everywhere. They occur in various places in later movies. Just to have them there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know a question a lot of folks definitely want to talk about, the on-camera transformation of the werewolves. Back in the day, it was that superimposed image, Lon Chaney would change the images and everything, but you kind of took it the next step with practical effects and bladders and stuff. Can you talk about how you wanted to get that done, how you brought it in?
Well, the old-fashioned way, which we were fans of, was very time-consuming. I mean, he would have to sit in that chair literally for hours, and with the, photographing frame by frame and changing the makeup and everything. It's like, oh boy, and also it had been done. So we felt that in order to modernize this concept, we wanted to make it seem. Our big pitch to AVCO was, we'll have him turn into a werewolf in one shot, and that sounded good to them. It sounded good to them, but it wasn't that easy to do. And later, interestingly, when CGI came along, there was a show called Manimal, where a guy turned into like an animal in one shot in CGI, and Michael Jackson used it, I think, also in a video, and it wasn't that dramatic. It was. Once you saw it, you saw it, and I realized later that it really wouldn't have been good for the movie to be able to do it that way. And also, it robs you of the editorial process of being able to see the reactions of the characters to what's going on, which is one of the ways that you sell special effects is by identifying with a character and then seeing what the character's reaction is. So even though we tried, and Rick Baker did a remarkable test of somebody in his shop turning into a werewolf in one shot. It was very, actually kind of disturbing. But once he left to do John Landis's movie and Rob Bottin took over, we did use the currently fashionable means of air bladders, which is you put the makeup over the guy's face and then you pump it up with air, and you can make it all move and ripple and stuff. And it became very overused, this technique in later movies, particularly a picture called The Beast Within, in which the guy's head blows up so big it looks like Charlie Brown. But in our movie, we basically wanted to be able to give the impression that it's painful to change into a werewolf. And so whenever something would pop, we would put a crack on the soundtrack and it would make it sound like a bone had broken. And even the mistakes that we made when we shot that material worked in our favor, because if you put the right sound effect on it, it looked great. The only problem in the movie is that scene runs too long. And the reason it runs too long is because we showed it to AVCO Embassy while we were doing it. And they said, this is great, don't cut a frame. Because they were using it to get the exhibitors interested in the movie. And said, whatever you do to the movie, just fine, but don't cut that scene. And now here's poor Dee sitting here staring at this werewolf changing for like, what? It seems like a half an hour.
No, Joe. There was nothing to look at when I shot my end of it.
No, I know that.
Oh,
No, I know that. But in the movie, it looks like you just,
yeah.
and so there's when we were editing in a building that had a casting office above, and they were casting something with kids. And the kids kept going by, and we said, let's bring in one of the kids and show them what this werewolf transformation is, see if they think it's cool. So we brought in some kids and we showed them the scene, and they were duly impressed. But in the middle of the scene, one of the kids says, why don't she run away? And I said, she's too scared. She's riveted to the scene. She can't leave. Because it's too long. I'm sorry. I mean, it just goes on longer than it should. And if I had been able to cut it correctly, it would be a better scene. It's fine the way it is. People have enjoyed it over the years, and technically it's very good. And it's also really well shot by John Hora, who just passed away recently, and who kept it wisely in shadow so that you couldn't see the rubber. And when Rick did his Oscar-winning work on American Werewolf, the only problem with it was it's very brightly lit. And all of the techniques in which he used to accomplish that are pretty apparent. And it looks kind of rubbery because the guy didn't put any dark in it. He just put light in it. And also I think John shot it from an angle that was different than the one he thought he was going to shoot it from. But anyway, it's a wonderful accomplishment. But I think ours is more mysterious.
John and Rob and you worked so much together. Rob would constantly be spraying, right?
Yeah.
And they would be talking about what angle and where the lighting was, because you didn't want to show so much. So there was a lot of artistry in how it was shot and the texture and everything going on to really bring the.
Yeah, we worked pretty hard on it.
To life. Am I on? Am I okay?
We can hear you. We can't
hear
see you. We can't see you right now, though, but we can hear you.
Okay, well, let me see what it says here.
Did you punch something?
Plug it. My camera is unplugged, it says.
Uh-oh.
Click the camera button. Hold
Yes.
on. I can do this. So,
Technical difficulties.
Live
See?
TV. There we are.
Yay.
See, people get all this great behind the scenes stuff from this show.
Exactly.
myself.
Behind the beaded curtain.
My assistant is watching this going, oh my God, Dee.
It's kind of as a follow-up to that. Can you talk about the transition from Rick Baker to Rob Bottin, and did he hand off the project, and was there any
Well, Rick-
kind of hard feelings involved? Or
No, there were no hard feelings on any side, but Rick was originally hired to do the show, and John Landis found out that he was going to do it, and then and Rick said, and John said to Rick, "You gotta do my picture, my American Werewolf picture," and Rick said, "You've been threatening to make this picture for years, and you never made it, and I have all these ideas, and I want to use them," and John said, "No, I'll make the picture." So Rick left and went to John's picture, and Rob, who had been his assistant, moved up into the head makeup space on the Howling, and we used a lot of Rick's ideas and a lot of Rob's ideas, because some of Rick's ideas didn't work now because of we weren't going to do it all in one shot, and Rob took over, and I guess it was the making of him, because I know Ridley Scott saw the picture, and hired Rob to do Legend, in which also includes Bob Picardo and tons of makeup, as almost all Bob Picardo's movies do, and then on to do The Thing, which became, in which Rob's material completely took over the movie and became the movie. So he really did become quite a player, and Rob's only drawback was that he was such a perfectionist, and it was just never quite good enough. And sometimes he would miss deadlines, and sometimes you'd have to wait. And the worst thing was that he would make some great monster thing, and he'd show you how it works, and you'd look at it and you'd say to Rob, "You're not going to stand there, are you?" Because he would not do it thinking that he had to be hidden. He would just do it thinking it looked cool. And of course, today with CGI, you could stand right behind it and operate it, and you could take him out with CGI, and it would be fine. But in those days, you had to hide everything. I had to hide all the wires and the ropes and the connections, and build sets up on stilts and all that sort of thing, which now you, of course, don't have to do.
I know, but there's a different feel to it. There's a different reality and a different texture to it when they're really there than CGI.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before I want to round back with you, Joe, Dee, I just want to let you know you made your daughter very proud.
Heck yeah, I'm proud.
So
too.
if she's proud, Dom has to be proud. So you're.
Mhm.
I'm so proud of my kid. He took lemons and created it into fabulous lemonade for her life.
Yeah. Joe, you had brought up John Horr. I wanted to talk because I know he has just passed away, and he was a frequent collaborator of yours. Can you talk about the relationship you had with him, especially with working?
This was the first picture that I did with John, and he had been doing nature documentaries, that some of the ones that I saw, Wilderness Family movies, those kind of things. But he was really good at night lighting. And there are some scenes in The Howling that look like Japanese paintings that are, sometimes they're in the real woods, sometimes they're on a soundstage, but you honestly can't tell the difference in the movie. I mean, literally half the stuff that's supposed to take place out in the woods is on a soundstage. And it's all lit so artfully that it all looks kind of like a fantasy. And as a person, John was rather eccentric, but in a very funny way. Very bright, and a total student of film history, and he bought every electronic gadget that he could buy. He had every single home video iteration was in his room, and that would go out of style, and he'd get another one. He was a big Studebaker fan. He had cars up on blocks in the back of his house, and they would sway in the middle like horses, because they'd been there for so long. And he was a terrific guy. But sometimes he would get so overcome with the magic of the job that he would kind of forget where he was. And there was one night when we were shooting a love scene between Chris and the evil
my God,
Marsha woman, which was it was a little tense because here's Dee's boyfriend is now doing this nude sex scene with this other person,
Jackson. Joe comes up to me the day before and he goes, "So, Dee, the crew is kind of wondering, are you going to be there tomorrow when we shoot this?" I said, "No, I'm going to town and getting drunk."
Nonetheless, we're shooting the scene. We're outdoors. It's at night. It's cold, and there's two naked people, and they're rehearsing. They're not naked yet, but they're rehearsing, and it's cold. And John pulls out a lens and he says, "So what do you think of this one? It's a filter, to make the fire look cool." And he says, "It's fine, John. Well, how about this one? How about this one?" Meanwhile, they're shivering to death, these people. And I look over and he's got a whole box of lenses. He must have had 35 lenses in there, and he wanted to show me every single one of them while these people were freezing to death. I said, "John, just pick the one you like and make a note of what it is if we have to do any reshoots, and let's just get these people back into their clothes." But that was John.
Dee, I had a question for you. Did Rob do your werewolf makeup when you cried? And if so, what was it like working with Rob and sitting in his chair?
No. Oh my gosh! Who was our makeup artist? I loved her.
Greg Canham.
No. Gigi did most of my stuff.
Well, but at the end, you sort of start to turn into a werewolf, and you've got the eyes and the fangs.
I think everybody kind of did. Somebody put a little bit of hair on me, and there were a lot of hands on me that day. Those were like 24 karat gold contacts or something.
Yeah, and comfortable as hell.
The thing about that thing was, Joe said, just do a little screen. We'll find a screen. And I went, well, gosh, give me a shot, right? Give me a shot at that screen. So I ripped one out of, I don't know where it came from. And I think that you used that, right? You used my screen, but you just echoed it.
Yeah.
A lot. But I didn't like those. Those contacts are gnarly to wear.
I know, they're horrible. And when you have 7 people who are all wearing contacts on the same scene, and you've got one guy, Dr. Morton Greenspoon, who specialized in putting these contact lenses in, and by the time you get to the 5th person, the first guy wants to take out his contact lenses because you can't wear them for very long. So it was really fraught trying to get everybody with the contact lenses for long enough to be able to get a shot with all of them in the same scene. That was tough.
You know how we got that last scene in the transformation? I was doing Cujo, and
Really?
Joe called me and said, we've shown the film to all the people, and all the notes that come back say they want to see Karen turn into a werewolf. Well, for some reason, I had in my contract that my character would never appear as a werewolf. I guess back then shit like that was important. So he called me and I went, well, Joe, I can't, I'm shooting. He said, no, we don't need you. We just need your permission. I went, oh, okay, sure. Just, can you make her a little bit more vulnerable because she's fought so hard? I want to know, because I never asked you, did I have any persuasion around that little bit of werewolf you guys came up with, or were you going that way all the time?
No, obviously you did, because the big question people have had about that is, how come she turns into a Pekingese instead of a werewolf? You know, and it was because we didn't feel that she should be a slavering monster like everybody else. We thought she should still retain, her own characteristics of who she was when she was a human being. And so that shot, which was literally shot in my editing room the night before we finished mixing the movie, is just this gigantic close-up of this fake head that Rob built.
An animatronic, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Isn't it cool how all the magic comes together? And
When it does, yeah, it's cool when it does. When it comes together. Sometimes it doesn't come together.
Oh, no, not in your career. No.
Yeah, we've touched about Rob Bottin and John Horr, but what about John Sayles? Joe, can you talk about him and his writing of the film? And
well, John is as you know, is a very well-respected screenwriter and director. He started. He wrote Piranha was his first screenplay for someone else, and then he took the money from that and he made a picture called Return of the Secaucus 7 with his friends in 16 millimeter. And that was his first movie as a director. But then he obviously the directing bug had bitten him. But you can't just make these pictures with the $1.98 that mom gave you for mowing the lawn. I mean, you gotta have somebody pay for these things. So he had a second career rewriting other people's scripts. And John has worked on more movies that you don't know that he worked on. Because he didn't get any credit, because the Writers Guild is very strict about who gets credit and who doesn't, but you do get money. So there's a whole number of pictures that he's had his hands in that he never got credit for. And there's a number of pictures that he is a co-credit with someone else because he came in and fixed up, quote, whatever script had a problem. And he was a script doctor for quite a while. And he and I have had various projects over the years, some of which have gotten made and most of which haven't. We have a current one that was currently not getting made. So we still keep in touch, and he's a very well respected, I would say, king of the independent filmmakers at the moment.
I had a question about back to the mythos. You kind of removed a couple of elements, like the full moon being one of them, but there was a couple of full moon shots in the film as well. Did you still want to keep an attachment to the old films, the old mythos?
Well, the problem with the full moon is the timeline. If you're going to make a movie where a person can only turn into a werewolf when there's a full moon, well, you get out the Farmer's Almanac, and that's going to write your script for you. So, if you one thing that we realized, which I first learned in a Hammer film called Horror of Dracula, where they had to completely redo the vampire myth to fit their budget by talking about some of the vampire things. We can turn it over. Oh, we can't do that. Really, So if you can reinvent these things for your own purposes and not cross the line to a point where people don't recognize it, I think you can probably get away with murder. But in this case, we hewed pretty close to the original concepts. Most of which were made up by Kurt Siodmak in 1941. I mean, there weren't very many werewolf movies before The Wolfman, and that being such a success, suddenly, all of a sudden, the lore just sort of crept into people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any backlash, or did you hear of any reaction from fans of the traditional werewolf movies for the change in the transformation or the mythos that you
nobody wanted to see us copying something that it was already a copy of something. I mean, they wanted to see something new, and that's what they still do. And the whole idea of genre is that people want to see the things that they know and love, but they don't want to see it done exactly the same way, or else it's kind of boring and they're disappointed. So you can lure them in with what they think they want to see, but then you have to have something to surprise them, or they're going to come away and they're going to say, well, this is kind of just like the other one that I saw and the one before that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes people don't like changes to mythos, and sometimes there's fans and those that are close-knit kind of hold on to that, and they don't like to see any of those changes. So sometimes you hear that when someone introduces a new element into a long-standing establishment.
Yeah, fuddy-duddies, I call them.
You can't make everybody happy, guys.
That's right. You can only make yourself happy.
You have to have your vision. And
if you don't make yourself happy, you're not going to make anybody else happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you both talk about filming on location in the Mendocino forest? Did that prove difficult or?
No, it was beautiful. It was gorgeous.
So gorgeous. In great antique shops.
She had some days off.
Antiquing. And yeah, it was just I just have great memories of being up there, and I mean it was a little cold at times, you know, but oh my gosh, working with all those wonderful iconic stars. I remember that one night that we were all around the fire outside, you know, and Chris was done, but he sat and listened to stories from all those old timers. They sat there for like 3 hours telling stories and memories about the great pictures they'd worked on and everything. I mean, that was a huge treat to be able to work with those gentlemen. You guys act like you don't know what I'm talking about. Everybody's with me, right?
Yeah. Yes. Hey, I love a good story, so I'm just sitting there paying attention. You know,
they haven't actually seen the movie.
I want to know why we cut the hot tub scene.
We cut the hot tub scene because, as you may recall, we got there and it was we were supposed to shoot that in a different location. And when we got to the location, for whatever reason, someone else was there and we couldn't shoot it, so we had to shoot something else. And then we had to move the hot tub scene to a different area, and we had to build it. And we weren't supposed to shoot it that day. And when we did shoot it, so I ended up in the editing room taking so much of the dialogue that was in that scene and putting it over other scenes to fill in spaces, that there was hardly anything left. So I think there may be on one of the outtakes on one of the DVDs. Yeah. There's some pieces left of that scene, I think.
Yeah, it's included on the Shout Factory Blu-ray. I think it's video only, no audio, but they did include what was shot as an extra feature.
Yeah, it was never in the movie for any. Even in the rough cut, I don't think it was in the movie for very much. It was just one of the things that didn't work.
So,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, so, you know, going along those lines, you know, the budget, you know, has been reported 1.1 million. Was that total production budget, or, you know, how did that affect your shooting?
I think it was 1 million, and the point was there was only $50,000 for the entire special effects for the whole movie.
Wow.
And when we first cut the picture together, Rob had built a whole lot of stuff, and one of them was a guy in a suit, you know, and if you put a human being in a hairy suit, they look like a bear. And so we shot a whole lot of stuff, some of it very pretty, but it just didn't work because it looks like these people looked like bears. So we redid a lot of material later. We asked them for a little bit more money, and they went to another company called Westcom, and Westcom people gave me another 100,000 or 50,000, I'm not sure, that we could put just into the special effects. And for that, they got a presentation credit, and they made a lot of money off the picture. In fact, they used to send me little plaques reminding me of how much money they had made from the movie, which is insulting to me because I wasn't in the Directors Guild, so I never got anything. I wasn't even paid for editing the movie because the company changed hands after after the picture was finished. So that was a money loser for me. But we did get the money to make the special effects better, and a lot of the material that does work that's in the movie is puppets and pieces of puppets that were designed, to fill in gaps. Where I built these great werewolf heads, but they only went up to here, and you put them on your arm. Well, that meant that if you're going to menace somebody and you're going to lunge at them, the camera has to lunge with you, or you're going to see the arm of the puppeteer. So we were very limited in what we could show. And I think when we first put the picture together, we were quite aware that this was not going to fly. And that we needed something more expansive. And so that's when we called back Belinda Blazi and we shot a whole bunch of extra scenes with these new puppets that were far better than what we had before and are some of the best stuff in the picture. But it was all done after the picture was finished.
Were you able to secure the money for those extra scenes just based on what they had seen already?
We showed them the movie, and they said, "Yeah, okay, we think this will make money, so we'll give them some bucks."
Mm-hmm. Another item that was cut was the rocket wolves. Was that just supposed to be a part of the? Was that just supposed to be? Go ahead.
The rocket wolves were actually made and shot and created, and there was some footage of them being shot up in Mendocino, flying through the woods. The problem is that they had an exhaust trail, and this was pre-CGI, so you couldn't take it out. So now we have wolves that are not only flying through the air, but there's a jet trail coming out of, as if they're like farting or something, and obviously wasn't going to work either. So we spent a lot of our $50,000 on things that we didn't end up using in the movie.
Oh no, that's great. Were those? What role did those guys? Was that part of the final attack after the barn burning? Or?
Probably, but I honestly can't remember, and I also can't remember how we used to launch them because I know there was a launcher. And to watch these, and they were very, very well drawn, well designed things with hair and all the accoutrements. They looked really good when they were not moving, and then once you started shooting them, well, there they were. They were shooting stuff out of their asses. So I don't know whatever happened to them. Maybe there's some merry-go-round somewhere up in Mendocino where they're
they've been mounted.
Remember the last day? It's the last day we had on the set where the barn was, and our generators blew.
Oh yeah.
This is the way I remember it. And all of you guys got together, and we all pulled our cars up and turned on our headlights, and that's how we lit that scene.
That's very true, and that's a bromide that I had heard about Roger Corman when I was working for Roger. That Roger said to save money on electricity, you get the crew together and you turn their car lights on, and you don't have to buy a generator. Of course, I thought it was ridiculous, but I never thought I would actually end up having to do it. But
it worked.
It worked.
It worked. It looked great.
Well, I mean, speaking of Roger Corman, I mean, he is, in the film very briefly, along with Forrest Ackerman, and of course we have to include Dick Miller. Were you a Famous Monsters fan? How did you get Forrest Ackerman to?
I had my first published writing was in Famous Monsters of Filmland at the age of 14. So yeah, I knew I was a monster kid like all the other readers, many of whom became Stephen King or Steven Spielberg. I mean, there was a lot of people who were united by that magazine and didn't know that there were people out there like themselves until they discovered there was a magazine for them. And it was an extremely influential magazine. And of course, because it was basically juvenile and full of puns, once you got past a certain point, you wanted something a little meatier. And so people would leave Famous Monsters behind and they'd start reading British film magazines like Sight and Sound or Films and Filming or something to get the real scoop on things. But it was the forerunner of all the current horror magazines, many of which Dee and I have done interviews for over the years.
A few.
The trailer, you mentioned, it kind of had the urban slasher feel to it, which was appropriate for 1981. Was that something you were cognizant of when you were shooting those scenes, or is that just something you developed in post?
No, we definitely wanted the first part of the movie to not look like a supernatural movie. We wanted it to look very contemporary, and so that people could relate to it on a human level. Because if you don't relate to the characters in these movies, then it's just a parade of special effects. So we spent a lot of time trying to build up the characters and their relationships and all that. And then when it came time to do the trailer, we wanted to sell the urban crime aspect of it before we got into the late show aspect of the movie, because that was the part that was the most familiar for people.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about the editing? Because the movie clocks in at like pretty much 90 minutes on the dot. What was your experience with it? How did it go for you?
I started as an editor, so I think like an editor, and I try not to overshoot. I don't shoot a lot of stuff I don't think I can use. There are a couple of things that aren't in the movie that we dropped for pacing reasons, and you can see them on the outtake reel. But there aren't that many. I mean, it's pretty, and also John writes pretty tight scripts. There's not a lot of extra material. The old bromide is that, when you write a script and it says 1,000 horsemen come over the hill, that's easy to read in one line, but it takes 3 days to stage. And a lot of the stuff in our script was, with his back to the wall, with his back to a door, Eddie turns into a werewolf. Okay, that's one line. But when you go to shoot it, it's several days, and in the movie, it's going to take a lot longer. I mean, there's a whole section of the movie where Belinda Blasky's character goes to Mendocino for the first time and wanders around the woods and goes into Marcia's cabin and all this kind of creepy stuff. That was all like 1 or 2 lines in the script. It ended up being like a large part of the movie, and also it was an opportunity for sound effects, because the sound effects in the movie are really good. And for music, because it's also got a very good score by Pino Donaggio, and he had this great church organ that he found in Italy, and so there was a lot of opportunity to, like, let's play the score, let's play the sound effects, let's play the God's own green earth that we're getting for free here, and so it's a matter of what you want to emphasize in your editing, but you got to keep moving, you got to keep it going.
And Dee, for you, was having a tight script easier to follow and work with, or did that present any challenges for you?
I prefer that. I like to know exactly what's expected of me, and then have the freedom and have the trust to allow the moments to happen that come in. But you can't do that if your director doesn't have a really strong vision, and you don't. I mean, I think Joe will agree with me that the first thing that has to be in place is a tight script, a good script, and then everything builds on top of that. So it's kind of like, there may be 2 or 3 different ways you can get to a destination that you're going to, but you have definite drawn directions how to get there, and that helps all of us, I think. Do you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, sure. If it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage.
Yeah. See, you could have asked him and gotten a lot shorter answer.
Dee, I want you to share your story about the premiere.
We all went to New York, and we all brought our families. We had the premiere in New York, and then the after party at Stage 54. So I was raised largely by my grandmother and was very close to her. She was, I think, at the time in her 60s, maybe late 60s, and or older. And we're in this big theater, and we're watching the movie, and Chris's scene comes on with the she-wolf, and you can hear a pin drop, and at the top of her voice, she says, "Christopher Stone, shame on you." Place loses it, right? I'm going, oh my God, Grandma, you can't break it, But it was sweet and endearing, and ultimately everybody loved it. So.
Were either of you ever approached to participate in any of the sequels?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Joe?
No, I wasn't. Gary Brandon, who wrote the book, didn't like me, so because he didn't like me, and And he didn't like the movie. So, because we took too many liberties.
Oh,
We
well.
took too many liberties. And so when he was in charge of the sequel, and I don't think they used much of his script, but to show his contempt for me, he had somebody at the beginning of his script walking a dog named Dante. So kind of showed what he thought of me. But there have been essentially, I think, about 8 different iterations of the Howling that followed it, all of which are varying degrees of terrible. And
I think my reply to them when they sent me the script was, I don't do pornography yet.
Wow.
No,
Okay.
but
that sequel doesn't even make any sense, because they started out as if no one has seen her turn into a werewolf on television. It's at her funeral, supposedly, and they all talk about this terrible thing that happened to her, but nobody knows but them. And it just abrogates the entire existence of the first movie. And it's like, well, why are you doing a sequel if you're going to just deny the facts of what happened in the first picture? So there's a woman playing Dee's part who lies in a coffin and is supposed to be her, and none of the other characters have anything to. I think one of the people is supposed to be her brother or something, and they end up going to Transylvania with Christopher Lee, and who apologized personally to me for being in the movie.
Oh no!
Well, it's not a very good movie.
No, it's not. Wow. Matt, did you have? I was going to move on to the Facebook questions.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. Johnny Punk asks Dee, what has been your favorite role in your career?
oh my goodness, I love you, Joe, but I think it would have to be the Howling, or it would have to be Cujo. I just think
Freudian slip.
Yeah. I went as far as I could go, as truthfully as I could go there in that movie. It pretty much took everything I had, but definitely the Howling is right up there. I loved my experience on the Howling. You have to understand, on the Howling, it was like, let's put on a show. And everybody was a big family. Chris and I, remember Joe, Chris and I would bring honey baked hams.
Yep.
And put them on the table so the crew would have more stuff on the catering table. I mean, it was just a big family affair, and everybody was just in it to give it their all and do the very best they could. So.
The next question was from Hans. It's for Joe. Do you have any plans for a new movie?
Well, that's sort of a perennial question, isn't it? Yeah, I had a lot of plans for new movies before COVID came. Now my plans, like everybody else's, are contingent on whether or not people are going to be shooting. I mean, Dee is already actually shooting stuff, but it's kind of an onerous experience. It's not like it's not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
To make during COVID.
It's I did an arc on 911, and I did another independent film, and I'm doing quite an interesting horror film right now. But it's challenging, guys, and you always have in the back of your mind, what if, you know, and everybody's in masks until you actually do a take. It's there's just a different energy on the set because of all of it, and it's challenging.
Juarez asks, how does working with makeup, classic makeup like Rob Bottin style with the Howling compare to working with like CGI now?
That's a Joe question.
Well, it's they're not comparable. I mean, makeup is still makeup. If you're going to put makeup on people, prosthetics and things, that hasn't changed much over the years. But the idea of altering people's faces with computer work And I don't think people quite realize how much CGI there is in even an ordinary scene that they see. How many skies that they're looking at aren't real, and how many set extensions of cities aren't real, because it's gotten so good that you really kind of can't tell. And it's a great tool, but I don't think it replaces the on-set stuff that actors can relate to. I remember watching one of the Star Wars prequels, and there were a whole bunch of good actors, and they were all together in one scene, and it was obvious that it had been shot on a green screen because they really kind of didn't look like they knew where the set ended, or where they could go, or how they could relate to each other, because in fact there was nothing there. And I think it's disorienting, and I don't think it leads to the kind of quality filmmaking that we had before we got so abstract.
Oh, I'm with you there.
Have you had any experiences like that, Dee, with like green screens? And
somebody approached me, see if I'd be interested in redoing Cujo again with CGI, and I went, not on your life. I think the fans would be up in arms, and it just wouldn't be the same movie.
I don't understand why you would want to redo it. I mean,
Thank you.
it's not. I don't get it. I mean, what are you going to gain from redoing it except having different faces on the characters?
I don't know. If they redid it, I'd probably be the old farm lady.
Well, not with CGI. They could make you look just like you did in 1981.
just like in The Irishman, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No thanks. No thanks.
Peter asks, how was Elizabeth Brooks to work with?
Elizabeth had not done a lot of things when I worked with her, but she is ostensibly, she's supposed to be in a Hitchcock movie called Family Plot, but I've never been able to find her. She was fine. We ended up cutting a lot of her dialogue, not because she couldn't speak it well, but because the character was just much more mysterious the less she said. And so there was a whole bunch of stuff, conversations that she had with people that we just thought, we're just giving too much away. And she was gorgeous. I mean, she was really mysterious looking and a nice person. But I just thought she was better when we heard less of her.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Do you have one pulled up, Matt? Go ahead.
I got one because I've seen it in the comments tonight. Can you guys talk about working with Slim Pickens?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
you had scenes with Slim, didn't you?
Yes, I loved him. He was so much fun. He was so sweet. He was just like a grandpa to me. He was that energy on the set.
He was great to have around. And I did the slates on the movie because I had him and John Carradine and these people with these interesting stories, and I wanted to hear them, but I was always too busy working. And so everybody else got to hear the stories, but I didn't. So I'd try to get them talking before we did the shots, and then in the middle of the story, I'd say, "Okay, hold that," and we'd take a take, and then I'd do another take so I could hear the end of the story. And it was working with people that you've been watching your whole life is one of the perks of making movies. It's one of the great things about it. And I've always tried to fill my casts with people that I liked and that I wanted to work with. And very often, as with Kevin McCarthy, I would find that it was somebody who became a friend of mine, and then I would want to put them in a lot of movies, and I would end up doing, a whole bunch of pictures with the same people.
Mm-hmm.
You both have a storied career. Was there, and you guys have done so much that's still enduring to this day. When was the first time that you saw the Howling was sticking around and people were really gravitating towards it and bringing it up?
You mean, when did it become a classic?
Yeah.
You don't think of it that way. I mean, you just, as you get older, you find that certain movies tend to fade away and other movies stay in people's minds. Yeah. And I've been lucky enough to make a bunch of those that people, probably because a lot of them saw them when they were kids or when they were younger, because most movies that people call their favorites are movies that they initially encountered when they were younger. And for whatever reason, they still resonate, and we're certainly grateful to have people still looking at our old work, because there are a lot of other movies that came out at the same time, some of which were very well reviewed and very well lauded, that have kind of fallen by the wayside, and people don't really remember them much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love both your guys' work, and I mean, Joe, I mean, honestly, my favorite movie of yours is Inner Space. I celebrate that movie more than I think most people do. And, you know, I love stuff like that, but I you know, I didn't see The Howling growing up. I kind of came into it later as a teenager, later teenager. And I was like, I get it, especially as I started to discover that more friends of mine were really talking about it. And it took me a while to get a chance to see it. So I just didn't know if that had ever, like, you woke up one day and you're like thumbing through a magazine, or someone's like, let's talk about The Howling. Because I know sometimes, you know, movies like that kind of catch folks off guard that it's stuck around for so long.
No, I just think, you know, like everybody who works on a movie that people still remember, we're just grateful that people remember it.
Yeah.
Got a question from Ramona, and it's one I thought of earlier. It's what is Joe's favorite movie from the movie collection behind him?
Well, this is a small portion of my holdings.
Very small portion.
Well, because I used to collect 16 millimeter. That's how I started, and I had this huge 16 millimeter collection. And now I'm too old to rewind the reels and take them back to the vault, and it's a pain in the ass. And all this new video stuff, I mean, it all comes off of negatives that are much better than the ones that they use for the 16 millimeters, and they look better, they sound better, they're easy. They're easy to run. You don't have to switch reels, and so I've just started replacing them all. And my favorite movie in this group, oh God, there's just too many, because there's a lot of Hitchcocks here, but. There's a movie called, you probably never heard of, called The Black Book, which is a 1949 Robespierre movie. That is it stars Richard Basehart as Robespierre, and he's looking for this book that's it's full of all the names of people that he's going to guillotine. And it was produced by William Cameron Menzies, who was a great art director, and shot by John Alton, who was a great DP. And directed by Anthony Mann, who then later became very famous for doing westerns. And it's a terrific movie, and easily found, as movies are now. Because when I was younger, it wasn't easy to find these movies. They either you stayed up 2 o'clock in the morning and watched on the Late Show, and if you missed them, then you're out of luck for the next 3 years, because they probably weren't going to rerun it. But now you can actually own it. You know, you can actually have it, hold it in your hand, and watch it as often as you want. So anyway, I recommend The Black Book if anybody is looking through their little IMDb book. I'll tell you where you can get it, but it's a terrific movie.
We have another question. There's a Mr. Dominic Mancini in the audience. He's been quite active tonight. He says, Mr. Dante, I love the Screwfly solution. Would you ever consider directing a sequel to it with the aliens taking over and battling werewolves at the colony who have survived?
Well, the answer to that, of course, is no. And I'm sure glad I'm glad he likes the Screwfly solution. It's the most depressing movie I ever made. I did it as an episode of Masters of Horror, and it's about a plague that causes men to kill women, and it's a contagious plague. There's no humor in it at all. It's unlike a lot of things that I've done. It just didn't seem to lend itself to being funny. And I've seen a lot of interesting manifestations of things in that movie in real life in the past 4 years that troubled me greatly. But I recommend it. It's certainly a fascinating science fiction story. But I don't think I'm going to be revisiting it.
Friend of the show, Jace Whitman, he asks, Joe, what did you think of Romero's Dawn of the Dead back in 78, 79? And the reason I asked that is because it reminded me, a lot of the news sequences at the beginning of the end reminded me a lot of the sequence at the very beginning, the news sequence of Dawn of the Dead. Did you happen to catch it back then? And
I did catch it back then, and my first thought was, boy, here's a movie that doesn't need to be remade. But I guess we're going to be getting some more of them without George, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's see. Was there any other from the crowd questions?
No, they must be good and sick of us by now.
Well, I saw a lot of I saw a lot of comments pop up. A lot of folks were definitely fixated on the hamburger flipping scene from the end of the film. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that.
Make someone a hamburger?
Yeah. Yeah, it's making me hungry for a hamburger, but that seemed to be a point of a hot point there at the beginning of the show. A lot of folks were talking about that. I don't know if you had any insight on that.
I thought it was a good image to go out on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we just held it. Yeah, let's cook the whole hamburger. We could roll all the credits.
Yeah. I have a question with this comment. Dee, you'll like this one. Your daughter said the first time I had the howling, my mom covered my eyes during the werewolf sex scene.
Oh boy.
I didn't want my daughter seeing her father screwing somebody else.
Yeah. So I didn't get a chance to ask this earlier when we were talking about effects, but I mean that is an animated scene in the film. What did you?
There was no other way to do. Well, there's some cell animation that pans off them while they're turning into. There was no other way we could afford to do it, and
it's real. I know. He walked in at 4 a.m. and I was still up, and he went, "It's all right, honey. Go to bed. Nothing happened. It was just something. Go to sleep." Not an easy night for me, I gotta say.
Yeah. We do have a question here for you, Dee, from Melinda's. Do you wish you had been a werewolf longer in the Howling instead of just at the end?
No, I don't. I think it was a perfect ending. I think the whole story is about me discovering it and fighting it. So that would have taken it into the sequel for me.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I saw a lot of comments asking if there was any potential for a 4K restoration of the Howling.
I couldn't tell you. It's the Howling's been through so many owners. It's currently owned by Studio Canal, and for a while there were 4 or 5 different distributors who owned it for different venues. One for home video, one for theatrical, one for laser disc, and I don't know where the negative is. I don't. The Shot Factory certainly did a good job with whatever they had, but I can't imagine that there's ever going to be a 4K. There's not even a what do you call them? What do you call those things they run at the theaters now instead of films?
Digital
DCP. There's no DCP.
Digital print. Yeah.
No, there's no DCP. So whenever anybody wants to run it theatrically, they always ask to run my print, and my print is getting a little old. And
talked about residuals. They play it all the time.
Yeah, but I don't get any money. You get money because you were in SAG.
Mm-hmm.
Not much, Joe. Not much.
No, I can imagine. You didn't get money. You didn't get much to begin with.
That's true. But I got to star in a film.
No, guys, I wanted to take a minute here and thank you guys so very much for letting us revisit the Howling on its 40th anniversary.
Yes.
It is definitely one of the seminal werewolf films that has transcended generations. Like I said before, you guys, the two of you have careers that we could go on and on for days. We could spend days. Yeah. No, we haven't. I want to come back and talk more. I mean, I absolutely have had a blast with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming on.
We were talking, before you guys had, 40 years, you tell a lot of the same stories over and over. And, a lot of these were very new to me and a lot of the folks that are watching. So please.
He's so young.
Hey, I was born 2 months before the Howling came out, so I'm not that young.
Shut up.
Pretty young.
No, I mean, seriously, guys, I want to give you the floor here before we take it home. What would you guys like to say? Anything you'd like to share? What you're working on? What you're doing? What would you like to share with your fans?
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, it's all on me now. Thanks for your continued interest is all I would say.
Thank you, Joe.
I would echo that. It was one of the grandest days of my youth to steal a line. And I just have a lot of heart feelings for Joe and Belinda and John and Dan and the whole experience. So thank you for letting us bring it alive again.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no, thank you guys, Joe and Dee and Dom. Thank you guys for allowing us to gather here tonight in this environment and celebrate the Howling. And I hope you guys after the show tonight go watch the Howling. Go buy it on Shout Factory.
Yes.
Let's keep it alive.
You disappointed?
Nope.
Absolutely
Definitely not. Thank you guys very much. And again, if you guys want to, please visit us at patreon.com/thegarf and the George A. Romero Foundation.org. Thank you so very much for supporting independent horror. It's what we grew up on. It's what we love. Joe and Dee, you guys are icons in the horror genre. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for your hospitality here tonight and your storytelling. Honestly, this has been such an honor. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
We'll see you next time on the GARF Network.
Take care, guys.